Have you ever poured your entire soul into something not for a job, not for money, but for the pure, unadulterated love of it? A project that becomes a living, breathing part of you, for me. That something was my garden. And if you've ever had to defend your passion against people who look at your life's work and see only a waste of time, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You'll understand this story in your soul. My story starts in a place most people wouldn't consider beautiful. It wasn't a neat English garden with tidy rose bushes and perfectly manicured hedges. My garden was a chaotic, buzzing, thriving wilderness, and it was my masterpiece. I lived in my childhood home, a large house in a relentlessly beige suburb, which I shared with my older brother, Mark, and his wife, Tiffany. The house was technically my parents', but they were retired and spent most of their time in Florida, leaving the house in our care. The front yard was Mark's domain, a sterile, green carpet of perfectly fertilized lawn, mowed into submission every Saturday morning. The backyard, however, was mine. For 5 years, I had painstakingly transformed the half-acre of useless grass into a self-sustaining, native pollinator garden, a rewilding project. I had spent thousands of hours researching, digging, and planting. It was a complex ecosystem of swamp milkweed for the monarch butterflies, deep purple bee balm for the rusty-patched bumblebees, and towering Joe Pye weed that would be covered in a shimmering carpet of swallowtails in late summer. It was a sanctuary, a living library of plants native to our region, most of which had been wiped out by decades of suburban development. To me, it was the most beautiful place on earth. To my brother and his wife, it was a public humiliation. Mark was a man who measured success in square footage and property values. He was a real estate developer who saw land not as a living thing, but as a commodity. Tiffany, his wife, was a woman who saw her life as a performance to be staged for her friends and social media followers. My wild, chaotic, and profoundly alive garden did not fit into their aesthetic of clean lines, gray furniture, and sterile, resort-style living. The conflict, which had been simmering for years, truly began to boil on a bright Saturday in June. I was on my knees in my favorite patch of wild bergamot, my hands covered in dark, rich soil, watching a hummingbird dart between the blossoms. I was completely at peace. "Lily, can you even walk through this jungle?" Tiffany's voice, sharp and dripping with disdain, cut through my quiet moment. She was standing on the pristine back patio, a glass of iced coffee in her hand, looking out at my garden as if it were a slum. Mark stood beside her, his arms crossed, a familiar look of disapproval on his face. "It's not a jungle, Tiffany," I said with a patient smile, refusing to take the bait. "It's a layered ecosystem. The taller plants provide shelter for the smaller ones." "It looks like weeds," she said flatly. "The Hendersons next door just put in a gorgeous new outdoor kitchen and a fire pit. Their yard looks so clean. Ours looks like we've just given up." "I haven't given up," I said, my smile tightening. "I'm actively cultivating this patch of milkweed right here. It's a registered monarch way station. I counted 6 chrysalises on it last week. And that patch of purple coneflower is one of the last stable food sources for the American bumblebee in this entire county." They just stared at me, their faces blank. I was speaking a language they had no interest in learning. I was talking about the life and death of entire species. They were worried about what the Hendersons thought of their lawn. "That's great, Lily," Mark finally said, his voice thick with the patronizing tone he used when he was trying to sound like a reasonable adult dealing with a difficult child. "But we're talking about property value here. We're talking about curb appeal. No one is going to pay $500,000 for a house with a backyard full of bugs." "I'm not planning on selling," I said. "No, but we are." Eventually, he shot back. "And right now, you're in charge of a half-acre of prime real estate that you're using to grow weeds. When are you going to do something useful with all this space?" I stood up then, brushing the dirt from my knees. The familiar anger, the hot frustration of being so completely and utterly misunderstood by my own family, began to rise in my chest. "Useful?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Mark, this garden is more useful than your entire manicured front lawn. Your lawn supports nothing. It's a green desert. This garden supports hundreds of species. It helps maintain the local water table. It is a tiny, thriving, and incredibly important piece of a much larger world. It is the most useful thing I have ever done in my life. Tiffany just rolled her eyes and took a loud, obnoxious sip of her iced coffee. Okay, hippie, Mark said with a condescending laugh. We get it. You love your bugs? He put his arm around Tiffany's shoulders. Just think about it, okay? Think about what this space could be, for the family. They turned and walked back inside their cool, air-conditioned house, leaving me standing alone in my sanctuary. But it didn't feel like a sanctuary anymore. It felt like contested territory, a battlefield. I looked around at my beautiful, chaotic, living masterpiece. I saw the flash of a monarch's orange wing, heard the low, contented buzz of a bumblebee. This wasn't just my garden. It was my heart, my soul, my life's work, made manifest in soil and stems and petals. And I knew, with a sudden, cold certainty, that they were planning to destroy it. The battle for the backyard had just begun. The day after my brother declared my life's work a waste of space, the campaign began. It was a strategic, two-pronged assault on my garden, with Mark leading the financial front and Tiffany handling the social optics. It started at the dining room table. Mark unrolled a massive, glossy blueprint, holding it down with the salt and pepper shakers. It was a landscape architect's rendering of their vision for the backyard. A huge, kidney-shaped, in-ground pool with a waterfall feature. A sprawling stone patio with a built-in gas grill and a fire pit. An army of identical, perfectly spaced lounge chairs. It was a design ripped straight from the pages of a resort catalog, luxurious, impressive, and utterly devoid of life. The spot where my thriving milkweed patch now stood was marked Cabana Pool House. This is what this family needs, Mark announced. His voice full of a salesman's passion. He was pitching to an audience of one our father, who had come over for his weekly visit. Dad, look at the comps. A pool of this size adds at least 15% to the property value. It's not an expense, it's an investment. It's a tangible asset. Tangible asset. That was the magic phrase for my father. He was a man who understood balance sheets. He looked at the blueprint, a flicker of interest in his eyes. Tiffany, meanwhile, was working on my mother, who had come over with my dad. Her approach was different, focused on the social currency the pool would provide. And imagine the parties, Susan, she gushed, her voice airy and excited. 4th of July, Memorial Day. We could host the annual fundraiser for the club here. All the neighbors would be so impressed. It would be the talk of the town. My mother, a woman who lived in mortal fear of being seen as less successful than the Hendersons next door, was eating it up. And all the while, they were systematically devaluing my garden, framing it as the one obstacle standing in the way of their glorious vision. It was a weed patch, an overgrown mess, a mud pit. They spoke of my years of hard work as if it were a stubborn stain they were trying to scrub out. I tried to fight back with logic, with facts. A sterile lawn and a chlorinated pool actually decrease property value for a growing number of buyers who are environmentally conscious, I argued, showing them articles I had printed out. And this garden is a registered wildlife habitat. It has ecological value. Have you ever tried to explain something you're deeply passionate about to someone, and they just look at you with blank eyes, like you're speaking a different language? That's what it felt like. I was talking about life, and they were talking about limestone pavers. Oh, Lily, that's just hippie nonsense, Tiffany said with a tinkling laugh. As if I had just said the earth was flat. No one cares about a few bees when they could have a gorgeous saltwater pool. The final confrontation came a few weeks later. My parents were over for Sunday dinner. Mark and Tiffany seized the opportunity to present their formal proposal. They had glossy brochures from pool installation companies. They had quotes. They had a financing plan. It was a full-scale corporate presentation. I came with my own presentation. I had prepared a binder filled with stunning photographs I had taken of the garden in full bloom. Pictures of monarch butterflies emerging from their chrysalises, of hummingbirds drinking nectar from the bee balm, of the intricate, beautiful patterns of frost on the winter seed heads. I also had a signed letter from the head of the biology department at the local university, who had brought his students on a field trip to my garden, commending it as a rare and vital example of successful local rewilding. I made my case with a passion that made my voice tremble. I spoke of the interconnectedness of the ecosystem, I spoke of the joy and peace it brought me. I spoke of its quiet, profound beauty. I was pleading for its life. When I was done, my mother looked at me with a pained, sympathetic expression. Dear, it's a lovely hobby. It truly is. But you have to be realistic. Think of the memories the family could make around a pool. A pool is a better use of the space, Lily, my father said, his tone final. It's a better investment for the family's future. Mark is right. I'm sorry, but our minds are made up. We're going to help the kids with a loan to get it started. And that was it. My own parents had sided with them. They had looked at my life's work, at the thriving, living sanctuary I had poured my soul into, and they had decided it was worth less than a place for Tiffany to host wine and cheese parties. The betrayal was absolute. I felt hollowed out, utterly powerless. Mark and Tiffany didn't even have the grace to look triumphant. They looked relieved, as if they had just won a long and tedious negotiation. As my parents were leaving that night, Mark walked me to the door. Listen. Lily, he said, trying to sound like a kind, reasonable brother. I know you're upset, but it's for the best. And hey, we can get this all done while you're away next weekend for that plant conference thing. You won't have to deal with the noise and the mess. You can just come home. And the hard part will be over. It'll be less stressful for you that way. The casual, calculated cruelty of that statement chilled me to the bone. He wasn't just planning to destroy my garden. He was planning to do it behind my back, to spare me the stress of watching him murder my dream. I just stared at him, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. He thought he was doing me a favor. He had no idea he had just handed me a declaration of war. My sanctuary had a death sentence, and the execution was scheduled for the one weekend I wouldn't be there to stop it. The weekend of the Mid-Atlantic Botanical Conference was supposed to be my escape. It was a chance to be with my people academics, horticulturalists, and fellow garden nerds who wouldn't roll their eyes when I talked about the intricacies of soil pH or the symbiotic relationship between mycorrhizal fungi and plant roots. It was the one weekend a year I felt completely, totally understood. But as I packed my bag on Friday morning, a terrible sense of dread hung over me. My brother's words from the previous Sunday echoed in my head. We can get this all done while you're away. It'll be less stressful for you that way. You're being paranoid, I told myself as I loaded my suitcase into the car. He wouldn't. Not without telling me. Not really. Tiffany came out onto the front porch to see me off. Her smile was blindingly bright. And a little too wide. Have so much fun at your plant thing. Lily, she chirped. Don't you worry about a thing here. We'll hold down the fort. The way she said it sent a fresh chill down my spine. It wasn't a reassurance. It was a threat disguised as a pleasantry. The conference was everything I had hoped it would be. I attended lectures on restoring native habitats. I sat in on a panel about creating urban pollinator pathways. I was surrounded by people who shared my passion, who understood that a garden could be more than just a pretty decoration. It could be a vital act of ecological restoration. For 2 days, I almost forgot the war I had left behind at home. I felt validated, inspired, and seen. I even exchanged contact information with a botanist from the Smithsonian, who was interested in seeing photos of my work with a rare species of native orchid I had been cultivating. The feeling of hope and inspiration lasted for most of the 3-hour drive home on Sunday evening. But as I turned onto my street, that familiar, heavy dread settled back into the pit of my stomach. The first thing I saw was the dirt. There were muddy tracks on the clean suburban pavement of our cul-de-sac. And then I saw the machine. Parked on the edge of my father's perfect, manicured lawn was a huge, yellow backhoe, its giant metal claw resting on the ground like a sleeping monster. No, I whispered, my voice a choked, strangled sound. No, no, no. I slammed the car into park, not even bothering to pull into the driveway. I left my suitcase on the passenger seat. I ran. I ran around the side of the house, my heart pounding in my ears, a frantic prayer repeating in my head. Please let me be wrong. Please let it be for the Hendersons' yard. Please. And then I rounded the corner, and my prayer died on my lips. Have you ever experienced a betrayal so profound, it literally knocks the breath out of you? A shock so great, your mind simply refuses to process what your eyes are seeing. My garden was gone. It was just gone. Where my beautiful, chaotic, thriving sanctuary had been just 2 days earlier. There was now nothing but a vast, gaping, muddy pit, a raw, open wound in the earth. The rich, dark soil I had spent years cultivating was churned and violated on the far side of the yard. My plants, my precious, rare, carefully nurtured plants were piled in a sad, wilted heap of green and brown, tossed aside like garbage. I could see the crushed stems of my milkweed, the torn leaves of my coneflowers. I could see a flash of deep purple my wild bergamot wilting in the pile of death. It was a graveyard of my life's work, and my own brother was the executioner. I think I made a sound, I don't know. My vision went blurry, my knees felt weak. I just stood there, on the edge of the pit, staring into the abyss where my world used to be. The back patio door slid open, and they emerged, my brother and his wife. They were holding celebratory glasses of rosé, smiling, laughing. They looked like they were hosting a party. "Surprise," Tiffany called out, her voice bright and cheerful. "We got a head start. What do you think? Doesn't it look amazing? So much more potential now." I turned to look at them. I think if my gaze could have set them on fire, they would have been 2 pillars of ash on that perfect stone patio. "What?" I started, my voice a raw, broken whisper. "What did you do?" Mark's smile faltered slightly at the look on my face. He adopted his patient, reasonable tone. "Now, Lily, don't overreact. We told you this was happening. We just decided to be proactive and get the hard part out of the way for you." "The hard part," I shrieked, and my own voice sounded foreign to me, a wild, feral thing. "The hard part, you destroyed everything. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I stumbled toward the pile of dead and dying plants. This was showy milkweed. It took me 3 years to get it to flower. It's the only host plant for the monarch butterfly. And this, I said, pointing to a mangled clump of green, was a species of wild ginger that is on the state's threatened list. You can't just buy it at a nursery. It's gone. You killed it. Tiffany just rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, Lily, you are being so dramatic," she said with a sigh. "It was just weeds. We did you a favor. You were obsessed with this garden. It wasn't healthy. Now we can finally have a normal backyard. A place for the whole family to enjoy, not just a place for your weird bugs." I spun around to face her, my whole body trembling with a rage so pure and so absolute it was blinding. It was not a weird hobby. It was important. It was my work. It was the only thing in this entire house, in this entire life. That was mine, and you took a backhoe and you turned it into a mud pit so you could have a place to day drink with your vapid friends. "That is enough," Mark said, his voice turning hard. "We live here too, Lily, and we have a right to enjoy this property. You were being selfish, hoarding this entire yard for yourself. This is a compromise, and it's time you grew up and accepted it." I just stared at them, at their unrepentant, self-satisfied faces. They felt no remorse. They truly, honestly believed they had done nothing wrong. They believed they were the reasonable ones. And I was the hysterical, dramatic child. In that moment, standing in the ruins of my beautiful garden, I felt a kind of heartbreak I didn't know was possible. It wasn't just about the plants. It was about the profound, unbridgeable chasm between my world and theirs. They would never understand. They would never see. I turned my back on them. I walked over to the muddy pit, knelt down at the edge, and I let my fingers sink into the churned, dead earth. It was cool and damp. There was nothing left. No life, no hope, just a void. They had won. They had finally managed to kill the one thing I truly loved. The 2 weeks following the destruction of my garden were a waking nightmare. I moved through my life in a thick, gray fog of grief. I'd go to my quiet job at the local library, stocking shelves and checking out books, my face a polite, neutral mask, but inside, I was screaming every time I closed my eyes. I would see the image of the backhoe's metal claw tearing through my beautiful, living world. The backyard was a constant, weeping wound, a giant, muddy scar visible from the kitchen window. Mark and Tiffany, for their part, were ecstatic. They had blueprints spread out on the dining room table every night. arguing happily about the merits of Pebble Tech versus plaster for the pool finish. They treated my grief as a personal inconvenience, an annoying mood they had to tolerate. "Are you still moping about that weed patch?" Lily Tiffany asked me one morning, her voice sharp with impatience. She was on her way to a yoga class, looking perfect in a matching pastel athletic set. "Honestly, it's been 2 weeks. The pool contractors are starting on Monday. You need to get over it." "It wasn't a weed patch, I'd say," my voice a dull monotone. "Lily? You're being irrational," Mark would add, not looking up from his phone. "It was just dirt and plants. We're improving the property for the whole family. You should be thanking us." I stopped trying to explain. They were incapable of understanding. I retreated to my room, my own small sanctuary within the house. I stopped eating dinner with them. I just wanted to be alone with my grief. They saw it as me being dramatic and childish. They had no idea how close I was to simply packing a bag and leaving forever. I probably would have, if not for the letter. It arrived on a Tuesday, a day as gray and miserable as my mood. The mailman handed me the small stack of envelopes, bills, junk mail, and one that made me pause. It was thick and heavy, and made of a creamy, elegant paper stock that felt expensive to the touch. It looked completely out of place amongst the pizza coupons and credit card offers. And the return address, printed in a clean, sophisticated font in the top left corner, made my heart stop for a second. Architectural Digest, One World Trade Center, New York. NY. I stared at it, completely bewildered. It had to be a mistake, or a very fancy subscription offer. I had subscribed to their magazine for years, poring over the stunning photos of beautiful homes and gardens. But I couldn't imagine why they would be sending me a personal letter, with a sense of detached curiosity. I took the letter up to my room and sat on my bed. I slid it open carefully. Inside was a single, heavy sheet of paper. Folded in 3, I unfolded it. The letterhead was simple, elegant, and bore the name of the magazine's editor-in-chief, a woman whose work I had admired for years. And I began to read. "Dear Miss Evans," it started, "it is with my most sincere admiration and profound pleasure that I write to you today. As you may know, every year Architectural Digest convenes a panel of the world's leading landscape architects, horticulturalists, and design experts to bestow our most prestigious honor, the Garden of the Year Award." I blinked, my mind struggling to process the words. This is definitely a mistake, I thought. Some kind of form letter. I kept reading. This year, the panel received a secret nomination from Dr. Alistair Finch of the Smithsonian Institution on behalf of your remarkable private rewilding project in Northwood. His submission included a portfolio of photographs and a detailed essay on your work in cultivating endangered native pollinator species. He described your garden as, and I quote, "a masterpiece of ecological art and a vital sanctuary of biodiversity in a world of sterile suburban landscapes." My hands started to shake. Dr. Finch, the kind, brilliant man I had spoken to at the botanical conference. I had emailed him some photos of my rare orchids. As he'd asked, I had no idea he had done this. My eyes scanned down the page, my heart pounding in my ears. After reviewing hundreds of submissions from around the globe, from the grounds of English castles to the rooftops of Tokyo, the panel was unanimous in its decision. "Ms. Evans, it is my distinct honor to inform you that your garden has been selected as the Architectural Digest 2025 International Garden of the Year." I read the sentence 5 times. It refused to compute. It was like reading that 2 + 2 = a unicorn. It was an impossible, nonsensical statement. Garden of the Year. My garden, my messy, wild, beautiful garden that was, at this very moment. A giant pit of mud and diesel fumes. I think I started to laugh then. It wasn't a happy sound. It was a wild, unhinged, half-sobbing laugh of pure, cosmic irony. It was the laugh of a woman who was standing at the center of the cruelest joke in the entire world. The letter wasn't finished. "This award is our cover story for the September issue. We would like to schedule a full photo shoot and an in-depth interview with you at your garden. Our team, including our lead photographer, a writer, and myself, would like to fly out in 2 weeks' time. Please have your assistant contact my office to arrange the details." I fell back on my bed, the letter clutched in my hand, and just laughed until tears streamed down my face. My garden, the useless weed patch, the obsession, the mud pit, was about to be on the cover of the most prestigious design magazine in the world, and it was gone, destroyed by the very people who had called it worthless. The hysterical laughter finally subsided, leaving a cold, quiet, and dangerous calm in its wake. My family, in their ignorant, arrogant rush for a symbol of suburban status, hadn't just destroyed my sanctuary, they had destroyed a piece of internationally recognized art. They had bulldozed a masterpiece. I stood up and walked to my window. I looked down at the muddy scar in the backyard, at the yellow backhoe that was still parked by the fence, ready to begin digging the hole for their precious pool on Monday. They thought they had won. They thought the story was over. They had no idea that a team of the most influential people in the design world was about to descend on our quiet suburban street. I picked up the letter, my hands perfectly steady now. The grief was still there, a hot ache in my chest, but it was now joined by a new feeling, a feeling of cold, hard, and deeply satisfying resolve. The game wasn't over. The story wasn't over. I looked at the phone number on the letterhead. It was time to make a call to New York. I sat on my bed for a long time, the thick, creamy paper of the award letter clutched in my hand. It felt like a holy relic and a cruel joke all at once. I was the winner of the most prestigious gardening award in the world, and my garden was a memory. The irony was so profound, so cosmic. It was almost elegant. The old Lily, the one who existed before the backhoe, would have cried. She would have crumpled the letter up, mourned the tragic, ironic loss, and accepted her defeat. But the woman sitting on the bed now was different. The destruction of my garden hadn't just broken my heart, it had forged something new in its place, a core of cold, hard, and deeply furious resolve. My family thought they had won. They thought they had buried my useless hobby in a pit of mud. They had no idea they had just handed me a weapon. I took a deep breath, my mind suddenly sharp and clear. I knew what I had to do. I smoothed the letter out on my bedside table, picked up my phone, and I dialed the main number for Architectural Digest in New York City. Getting through was a battle in itself. I was passed from a polite but dismissive receptionist to a brisk, efficient-sounding assistant. "Miss Davenport's office. How can I help you?" the assistant asked, her voice exuding an aura of someone who deals with important people all day and was quite certain I was not one of them. "Let's call the editor, Diana Davenport." "Hello," I said, my voice steady. "My name is Lily Evans. I need to speak with Mrs. Davenport, please." "I'm sorry. Miss Davenport is in a meeting. Can I take a message?" It was the classic gatekeeper brush-off. "Please tell her," I said, my voice dropping into a lower, more authoritative register I didn't know I possessed, that Lily Evans is calling regarding the 2025 International Garden of the Year Award. It is a matter of extreme urgency. There was a pause on the other end of the line. The name of the award was the Magic Key. I heard a muffled exchange, the sound of a hand over the receiver. A moment later, a new voice came on the line. It was crisp, intelligent, and exuded a power that was effortless. "This is Diana Davenport. To whom am I speaking?" "Ms. Davenport," I began, my heart starting to pound. "My name is Lily Evans. I just received your letter. Thank you. It's the greatest honor of my life." "Ah, Miss Evans," her voice warmed instantly. "Congratulations. We are all just so utterly thrilled with the panel's decision. Your work is simply breathtaking. The photographs Dr. Finch submitted. We've never seen anything like it. A perfect marriage of ecological responsibility and pure, artistic chaos. We cannot wait to see it in person." My throat tightened. This was the hardest part. "That's actually why I'm calling. Miss Davenport," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "There's been a development regarding the garden." "A development?" I took a deep breath. I was away for a few days at a conference. While I was gone, my family, with whom I share the property, they have always considered my garden to be an eyesore. They had other plans for the space. I paused, the words catching in my throat. "They hired a backhoe, and they destroyed it. The garden you chose as Garden of the Year. I'm so sorry to tell you this, but it is now a giant pit of mud. There was a silence on the other end of the line so profound I thought the call had dropped. I could picture her, this powerful, elegant woman, sitting in her corner office overlooking Manhattan, completely floored. They did what she finally whispered, her voice a mixture of disbelief and horror. "They're putting in a swimming pool," I said. My own voice flat and dead. Another long silence. I waited for the inevitable, the polite withdrawal of the award, the sympathetic but firm explanation that they couldn't possibly feature a mud pit on their cover. But when she spoke again, her voice was completely different. The shock was gone, replaced by something else, a new energy, a sharp, fascinated, almost predatory excitement. "My God," she said, her voice low. "That's monstrous. That's a tragedy." She paused. "And it is the most incredible story I have heard in my entire career." I was so surprised. I didn't know what to say. "Ms. Evans, Lily," she said, her voice now crackling with a new, creative energy. "Listen to me very carefully. This does not change a thing. No, that's not right. This changes everything. For the better." "The better?" I asked, confused. "But the garden is gone. Don't you see?" she said, her voice full of a sudden, fierce passion. "The story is no longer just about a beautiful garden. It's about the battle for what beautiful even means in the 21st century. It's about the clash between thoughtful, sustainable art and bland, materialistic consumerism. It's a story about a brilliant, unrecognized artist being betrayed by her own family, Lily. This is a story about a masterpiece being destroyed for a swimming pool. It's 1,000 times more powerful than just pretty flowers." I made the call expecting pity instead. I was getting a lesson in narrative genius from one of the best editors in the world. My family thought they had buried my story. They had no idea they'd just made it the headline. "We are still coming," Diana said, her voice now full of an iron resolve. "Don't cancel a thing. In fact, I'm coming with the team. I wouldn't miss this for the world. And the photographer we have booked for this, a man named Marcus Thorne. He is a poet of decay and beautiful tragedy. He will know exactly what to do with a muddy pit and a pile of dead plants." She wasn't just going to run the story. She was going to turn my family's act of destruction into a piece of high art. "So you just sit tight, Lily," she commanded. "Don't say a word to your family. Let them start digging their ridiculous hole. We will be there in 2 weeks, and we are going to tell a story that this country will be talking about for a very long time." I hung up the phone, a wild, dizzying sense of power surging through me. My grief was still there, but it was now overlaid with something new, a feeling of cold, brilliant, and deeply satisfying vindication. I walked to my bedroom window and looked down at the muddy scar in the yard. It was no longer a graveyard. It was a stage, a beautifully set stage for my family's public and very prestigious humiliation. The team from Architectural Digest was coming, and all I had to do now was wait. The 2 weeks I had to wait for the Architectural Digest crew to arrive were the most surreal of my life. I was a different person. I walked through my house with a quiet, secret smile. My grief for my garden was still there, a tender bruise on my soul, but it was now overshadowed by a feeling of profound, almost terrifying power. I was a general waiting for my air support to arrive. Meanwhile, my family was in heaven. The pool company had arrived on Monday, just as they'd planned. The backyard was a noisy chaos of machinery and construction workers, digging their monument to bad taste even deeper into the earth. Mark and Tiffany would stand on the patio every evening, sipping wine, admiring the hole, and planning the guest list for their inaugural pool party. They treated me with a distant, clinical concern. As if I were a convalescing patient, they were graciously tolerating. "Feeling better today?" Lily Tiffany would ask, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "It's starting to look really great out here. You'll see, it will be worth it." "I'm sure it will be," I'd reply, my voice a mask of placid calm. They had no idea what was coming. The day the magazine crew arrived was a spectacle. A sleek black passenger van and a larger equipment truck pulled up in our quiet, suburban cul-de-sac. A team of stylish, serious-looking people from New York City began unloading expensive camera equipment, light stands, and reflector boards. It looked like a film crew had descended upon our beige neighborhood. Mark and Tiffany, who were in the front yard, practically flew out of the house. I watched from the living room window as their faces lit up with pure, ecstatic disbelief. They couldn't have planned it better. The pool construction was underway, and a major magazine had arrived, obviously, to document their amazing, high-status home renovation. This was the ultimate validation of their vision. I saw Tiffany smooth her hair, a practiced, camera-ready smile plastered on her face. Mark walked over to the woman who had just stepped out of the van, his hand outstretched, ready to welcome them to his domain. It was Diana Davenport, the editor-in-chief, looking impossibly chic in a black pantsuit. "Welcome," Mark boomed, his voice full of feigned, casual charm. "You must be from Architectural Digest. I'm Mark Evans. This is my wife, Tiffany. We're the owners." Diana shook his hand, her own smile professional and unreadable. "A pleasure to meet you," she said smoothly. "Thank you for having us. We're here to do a feature on the developments in your backyard." Of course, Tiffany gushed. "We are just so thrilled you're here. We're in the middle of a massive upgrade. It's going to be fabulous." Diana introduced the rest of her team, including the famous photographer, Marcus Thorne, a man with a wild gray beard and intense, artistic eyes. Then, she looked past them, towards the house. "And where is your sister?" "Lily, the story is really about her." "Oh," Lily, Mark said with a dismissive wave. "She's inside somewhere, moping. Probably. She wasn't exactly a fan of the renovation." "I see," Diana said, her expression unchanging. "Well, we'd love to start by interviewing you both on the patio, to get your perspective on the transformation." This was it. The stage was set. I watched from the window as the crew set up on the patio overlooking the muddy pit. Diana sat Mark and Tiffany down in 2 patio chairs. A writer sat with a notepad, and Marcus Thorne began circling them with his camera. Like a shark, I crept to the open patio door, staying just out of sight, and I listened. "So tell me about your vision for this incredible space," Diana began, her voice a purr of professional interest. "Well," Tiffany started, leaning forward conspiratorially. "The yard was just a total mess before an overgrown, useless weed patch. My sister-in-law, bless her heart, has this eccentric little hobby with plants, but it was an eyesore. We wanted to create a space that was actually usable for our family, for entertaining, a clean, modern, resort-style feel." "I see," Diana said, nodding thoughtfully. "So you made the audacious decision to demolish a mature, established garden. What a bold statement. What was the driving force behind that choice?" "It's all about lifestyle," Mark said, puffing out his chest. "It's about creating a hub for our friends, our community. It's about increasing the property value. The garden, as it was, added nothing. It was just dirt. This," he said, gesturing proudly at the giant hole, "is an asset." While they spoke, Marcus the photographer was working his magic, but he wasn't taking glamorous photos of my brother and sister-in-law. He was taking stark, artistic, and deeply unflattering shots of the destruction. He took a heart-wrenching close-up of a single, crushed coneflower on the edge of the pit. He took a wide shot of the muddy hole, with Mark and Tiffany looking small and foolish beside it. He was documenting their crime with the eye of a master. Diana looked at her notes. "This is all fascinating, especially since the reason we're here, the reason we flew a team all the way from New York, is to present your sister, Lily, with our 2025 International Garden of the Year Award for the very weed patch you've so eloquently described." The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I have ever heard. I stepped out onto the patio. The looks on their faces were a portrait of pure, unadulterated horror. Tiffany's jaw was literally hanging open. The color had drained from Mark's face, leaving him a pasty, sickly gray. Their smug smiles had frozen, then shattered, replaced by a look of dawning, public humiliation. They stared at me, then at the famous editor, then back at me. They were trapped. They had just spent 15 minutes, on the record, telling one of the most powerful editors in the world how they had proudly and deliberately destroyed an internationally recognized masterpiece for a swimming pool. Marcus Thorne's camera clicked, capturing the exact moment of their horrified realization, a perfect, priceless shot of 2 fools reckoning with the magnitude of their own arrogant ignorance. That photo, a stunning black and white image of my brother and sister-in-law's horrified faces, with the muddy pit looming behind them, became the opening spread for the Architectural Digest article. The story, titled "The Garden and the Machine," was a sensation. It wasn't just about my garden. It was a poignant, brutal story about what our society chooses to value. I was hailed as a visionary, a hero of the rewilding movement. My family was portrayed as what they were: thoughtless, materialistic villains. The public shame was immense. I took the prize money and my newfound fame, and I moved out. I bought a small piece of land a few towns over, a place with rolling hills and a beautiful, clear stream. And I started to build a new garden, bigger and more beautiful than the last. My new company, a landscape design firm specializing in native habitats, is now more successful than I could have ever dreamed. My family still has their pool. I'm told they never have parties. It sits there, a pristine, chlorinated monument to their spectacular bad judgment. They took a backhoe to my heart. They turned my sanctuary into a pit of mud, but they didn't realize. You can't bury a seed of passion that deep. It will always, always find its way back to the light. They thought they were burying my story. They just ended up giving it the perfect, tragic, and ultimately triumphant ending. Thank you for listening. If you've ever had a passion that other people dismissed as useless, tell me about it in the comments. Like, subscribe, and go plant something beautiful, even if it's just in a pot on your windowsill.